On December 7th, 1941, after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the station was notified about a state of war with Japan. The next day, Squadron Leader Fred S. Carpenter arrived with 2 Supermarine Stranraer flying boats from Patricia Bay at Victoria. Carpenter assumed command of No. 9 Bomber Reconnaissance Squadron. Operational patrols started immediately with the 2 Stranraers. They responded to an alert that a Japanese submarine had been sighted north of Vancouver Island in Queen Charlotte Strait. By February 1942, station personnel numbered 455, crowded into unfinished barrack buildings. In December 1942, the station received its first consolidated PBY-5A Canso aircraft, which would allow the 9 BR Squadron to extend its patrols over the Pacific for as long as 28 hours. By late 1942, Western Air Command had begun construction of airfields at Patricia Bay near Victoria, Tofino, Port Hardy, Sandspit, and later Comox. But lack of an airport on the central BC coast was perplexing, as the flying boat station at Bella was only a temporary solution. By the end of July 1944, the station's strength, including Army personnel, was 750. Japan had suffered major defeats. The threat of invasion on the west coast had diminished. For economic reasons, as well as difficulty supplying remote stations, a decision was made to disband No. 9 BR Squadron and the station. RCAF station Bella was closed September 1st, 1944, with only a small detachment to support the No. 9 RU radar unit at Spider Island until its post-war disbandment. The Cold War in the late 1940s and 50s saw an increase in U.S. military aircraft along the coast between Alaska and the lower states. The USAF Strategic Air Command deployed the largest bomber ever built on daily flights toward Russia. The aircraft was armed with nuclear bombs in anticipation of attacking that nation should it commence belligerent activities against the Western world. The evening of February 13, 1950, a flight of consolidated B-36B bombers was returning south from Fairbanks to Carswell in Texas along the BC coast. B-36B number 2075, commanded by Captain H.L. Barry, had 15 crew and 1 special passenger. 6 hours into the flight, ice and engine failure forced an emergency over Heiltsuk Strait. The 11,000-pound Fat Boy nuclear bomb was jettisoned into the sea near Athelda Bay on Estevan Island. Soon after, the crew began to bail out of the bomber, now on autopilot, heading out to sea in a southwesterly direction. Events that followed began the first Operation Broken Arrow, code for loss of a nuclear weapon. A rescue mission, codenamed Bricks, began immediately. The mission included both United States and RCAF aircraft, along with U.S. Coast Guard and Royal Canadian Navy vessels. Most of the crew were rescued on Princess Royal Island. The intrigue was not over. About 3.5 years later, the aircraft was found on September 4th, 1953, almost 200 miles north of where the crew had abandoned it. The wreckage was on a 6,000-foot mountain in northern BC. Amid rigid security and clandestine activity, it took several years for the United States Air Force to access the site. For many years, flying boats and seaplanes of several commercial companies were the only aircraft in Bella Bella. Many aircraft were lost on this weather-beaten, rugged coastline. In the late 1970s, a single-engine Cessna made an emergency landing in Bella Bella in a school playing field. Bella Bella was growing, but it wasn't until the 1980s that Bella Bella had its first airstrip for land-based aircraft. It was at Denny Island, adjacent to Shearwater, site of the RCAF station at Bella Bella. Craig Winston of Shearwater Marine on Denny Island began working with Don Brathwaite. Brathwaite had started on a rough 3,000-foot gravel airstrip 2 miles east of Shearwater. This airstrip was well underway and became serviceable in spring 1980. Later, a 3,200-foot airstrip was built 1 mile northwest of the village on Campbell Island. Aviation author Chris Waite was hired as chief pilot and operations manager of the First Nations airline established at Bella Bella in 1983. Waite became familiar with the intricacies of flying in the area. He left for greener pastures in 1987. Bella Bella Airport is on Campbell Island, known as ZEL and CBBC. It's 1.9 kilometers northwest of Bella Bella. A paved road connects the village and airport. The airport forms a hub of sorts for the Central Coast, with flights linking to Klemtu, Port Hardy, and Vancouver. A halfway point for small aircraft between Seattle and Alaska, this airport offers a point to rest and refuel. GPS and NDB approaches are available, but only daylight operations are available.